Well, welcome. I'm so glad everyone is here. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to talk to you about how sleep impacts learning and behavior. Um, so, as always, if you all have any questions or anything, or if we don't have time to cover everything, I'm always available via Brightwheel. You can always message me that way, or also send me an email. So just think about that anytime. So I'm so glad you guys are here, and I can't wait to get started. So let's get this going. All right. Did that move? Okay, cool. Oh, this is probably why. Sorry. Um, why? Uh, there we go. That's why. There we go. All right. So I really loved this quote. It really spoke to me about sleep, but also the full child, like just the whole child. So it's not enough to see that the child gets good food, good physical care, and enough sleep, but physical development needs activity too. Experience in the environment is necessary because everyone must adapt to the environment. Maria Montessori. So before we get started, I know that sleep can be a kind of topic that may seem kind of simple and not maybe challenging. But I know that it can be challenging for the adult. It can also be challenging for the child, and both at the same time. So before we get started, I really just want you to think about when you think of sleep, ideally, what is your end goal with sleep? Um, do you ideally want your child to sleep? Do you want your child to rest? Do you want it just to be a quiet place? Do you want your child to stay awake the whole time if they're not sleeping in the evening? Um, does that make your behaviors in the child more challenging? Do you want your child just to lay peacefully? So think about that as like the end goal and ideally what you think about sleep. So things that are challenging for you around sleep, just think about what is your goal for sleep for your child as well as yourself. So think about that. Maybe you want to jot it down. Maybe you just want to think about it. So we'll touch on that, but just something to think about in terms of sleep before we get started. So let's think about that, and we'll come back to it later. So why is sleep so important? Sleep affects so many different areas and not just one specifically. So it's looking at your physical growth, especially your immune system, how your energy is restored or not restored by not sleeping, weight management, just all of that as an umbrella of physical growth. When you think about sleep, you also think about mental and cognitive development. That's where a lot of your like learning and memory are stored, how your attention and focus is, your emotional restoration, and problem solving. When we also think about sleep, we also think about behavioral and emotional well being. So that really affects your mood, your behavior, and your mental health. So when you think about sleep, all of these categories are under the umbrella of sleep. So they all need to be there in order for sleep to function properly, in order for you to feel rested. So this is kind of just like a basic understanding of why we look at sleep just in general. So when we think about an appropriate amount of sleep for a child per day, on average, this is very general. A toddler should be sleeping about 11 to 14 hours per day, and that includes sleep too, or that includes nap also. So when you look at the nap periods of time that your child is sleeping, that is also added into how much they're sleeping at night. So if your child's sleeping maybe 2 or 3 hours of the day, that affects how much they're sleeping at night or not sleeping as much at night. So think about those windows of time, also, and just like the full sleep of your child in one day. So when we think of a toddler and an appropriate amount of sleep per day, that does affect the child's brain and their body and how they're connecting. It also affects the child's brain and how they process new experiences. how they form memory and also learning pathways, their creativity, and rebalance emotional responses. So when you have an appropriate amount of sleep, the toddler is also promoting better decision making skills. It's also helping with problem solving and their creativity too. How sleep affects our behavior. So, too little of sleep can cause tantrums, increase irritability. A change in routine can lead to power struggles or resistance. Can also There could also be a change in behavior. Also, lack of energy and overstimulated before bed can also disrupt your sleep. So tantrums are not always just behavioral. Sometimes they can be biological too. Tired toddlers, especially, do not have the brain capacity to regulate big emotions, let alone any emotion when they're tired. Um, Sleep deprived toddlers also really struggle with transitions. They react more impulsively. They can also, you could also see behaviors of them like crying or screaming or just kind of acting out in minor situations or issues. They're not where they're not able to regulate slash control their emotions from lack of sleep or maybe not sleeping as often as they would in that typical day. Um, in a well prepared environment, a child is supported in self regulation. Sleep supports also their interior order. Um, if a child is tired at school, um, you know, you can tell that they're more tired or just kind of need a place, are just, yeah, we help them find a place where they can rest, or also a place where they can just kind of have more of a quiet place to be. We have established those in my room, just to have that be an option for a child if we are noticing that they are a little bit more tired or a little bit more tender. We can offer those places for that child to go. That's also the same if they're not able to participate in group activities. We'll also let the parent know, but also we can tell that there's like a change in their behavior slash their schedule. If a child, sometimes we also have a child, some children actually, that fall asleep during the lunchtime. So if we do notice that, we're going to move up our schedule to accommodate those children. So sleep can look different in different ways and doesn't always mean that a child is, having a tantrum or a big feeling. Sometimes children just are naturally tired and will fall asleep, but that's also their change in behavior too. So if a child is a little bit more quiet or maybe falling asleep at the lunch table, we will help them pack away and then help them find their nap mat so that they can find rest. So we really just follow the lead of the child. You can also tell if a child maybe hasn't slept in the night before, or they might be acting differently at school. Maybe they're a little bit more sensitive. They might just be, a little bit more moody, I guess, or, kind of short to respond to messages. So we look at all areas of the child, to think about when it comes to sleep. If a child wakes up in the night and asks for more food or a hug, or maybe wants their covers over their body, we kind of just you can discuss these things with the child throughout the day at a neutral time. So messages that you can say to the child are, remember when you woke up last night and you really wanted the covers on your body? Um, let's think of ways that you can do this, or do you have any ideas of how you can best support yourself? And then talking them through different ways of maybe like finding the blanket and showing them the top of the blanket, for example, if that was something that they were needing, instead of you going in and doing that for them. A big thing that we're going to talk about is uh, really having this be um, a way that the child can self soothe. So a consistent sleep routine is super, super important. Definitely having a prepared environment for the child is super important for them to be successful. As you can see, these are two different pictures of a floor bed option. One of those is the ones that we use at school. And another one is just a beautiful Montessori floor bed where the child's able to get in and out of that bed by themselves independently. Um, so a lot of that is super important with offering the child a space where they can independently find sleep when they are tired. So really, really can't stress the importance of the prepared environment when it comes to sleep. So just like we have the prepared environment for all other areas of the day, like for food when we eat and when we do work, our work period, and when we're outside, playing also that is so important with sleep too. So like I said, having a low bed on the floor, which is really great for the child to be independent and they can manipulate it on their own. Also, super important is really encouraging self-soothing. So that's really going to help the child also have less tantrums if they're in more control of their environment around sleep too. So just thinking about what does their, you know, bedroom look like, or what does their sleep situation look like? You know, are they able to find sleep when they're tired? You know, can they get into bed by themselves? You know, are they needing more support around that? Really just being aware of what that looks like. Um, Also super important with self-soothing is, you know, can the child work through when they are upset when they're sleeping? Can they start to work on that on their own to feel more comfortable to sleep by themselves independently? I know that that can be really tricky when, you know, maybe a child is more sick and you do, you know, obviously want to step in. But I think more times you can tell when the child's kind of making those sounds or just wanting that support or maybe wanting more connection. They might use, you know, crying or calling your name to then have you come back into the room. And so just thinking about those things of like, okay, is this something that your child can do independently? You know, are they maybe crying because, you know, they dropped their water out of their bed, or you know, are they crying because maybe they are teething, or maybe they're not feeling well? You know, those are very different cries. So thinking about that in terms of soothing too. You know, they, like I was saying, they might cry for you to come into bed, just really observing. And that's a big part of something that we're going to touch on later, is just really observing to see what exactly your child is telling you and what exactly is happening so that you can figure out, do I want to step in? Or do I kind of want to have my child work through this a little bit? And when is it time that you're like, okay, I'm really going to go help you? You know, it's totally fine to step in. You know, I encourage that too when it happens at school. It's just something that we like to observe first, of just like sometimes children do fall asleep with kind of crying or making sounds, and that's just their way of kind of soothing themselves to sleep. A child might also cry if they're relying on a pacifier to sleep. A pacifier is a sleep crutch and a barrier, which is causing them to rely on something which is inhibiting them to actually sleep independently. So I know that that can be kind of tricky to transition out of a pacifier. But if a child is ultimately looking for that or needing that to sleep, they're not able to actually independently sleep on their own. And so that's a really big thing that we work on at school, is just not having those barriers available. And so I think the more that you just really focus on your child independently doing this, really letting them feel like you got this, you can sleep on your own, really empowering them will really help without the distractions of something else. Um, you know, toddler that does have a pacifier that is, you know, not supporting their development, it does also really affect the way that their mouth forms and the way that they speak too. So those are things that, you know, just I know are available and something that I can help you work through too, if that's something that you are experiencing at home, or things that you're trying to transition out of. I'm happy to do that also. You know, a child might rely on a pacifier, but a child might also rely on an adult for sleep. So that kind of looks like more co-sleeping or just needing that parent to kind of be in the room or outside the door or, in a rocking chair close by. And so, you know, co-sleeping is, it is a little tricky because it works for some families and it doesn't work for other families. And that's totally fine. Use your best judgment when it comes to co-sleeping. I think, if you're if you think about your child's sleep and if they're relying on you to be in the environment to be able to sleep, um, that's not supporting them doing it independently. And so I think just thinking about that in ways of how can you help transition out of this so that you can also, trust in your child to know that they can do it and also have the child experience how to do it. A lot of this is also just about opportunity. And so just giving the child the opportunity to independently sleep. If they're sick, that's a little bit different. But I think, just think about that too, because then the child does rely on you to be there. And, same like with a pacifier, the child does kind of rely on a pacifier to be able to sleep. And if we think back to the beginning, ultimately, what is your end goal? Do you want your child to sleep? Most of the time, that answer is yes. And so, when it comes to that, you do want to make sure that you're providing your toddler with the prepared environment, with the specific things that exactly they need to be successful. And a part of that would be removing yourself from the situation if they are relying on you to co-sleep. Um, Also, establishing a predictable bedtime routine is super important. So have that be consistent every time you put your child to sleep. Does that look like the same at nap time as well as bedtime? Do you read your child 3 stories every time before they go to sleep? Or maybe you sing the same song. Have those things be the exact same every single time. Do you maybe put them into bed first and then you sing those songs and then you turn off the lights? Or maybe you turn off the lights first and then um, put them into their bed and then they sing. Just think about those things, so that it's consistently the same every time that they go to sleep. Think about also the what your day looks like, as you're transitioning into these times of the day. Is the flow really peaceful and, pretty fluid? Is it, a little bit more chaotic? Think about those things as to what maybe you did before or after, or before sleep, excuse me. Think about that too, of maybe you were out, running some errands and you got home really late and now you're just like, okay, we don't have time to read stories. We just got to go to bed. Sometimes those things happen. Also observe that too, because if the child is kind of having a tantrum or it is more emotional, think about that, of maybe giving yourself a little bit more time next time if you do that, to make sure that it's successful for you as well as the child. Um, Also, thinking about the prepared environment, it's super important, just like the pacifier, that there aren't any toys or any like barriers or distractions in the bed. And so sometimes parents like to have toys in the bed, or sometimes the child is like, oh, I really want to sleep with this truck, or I really want to sleep with this specific animal. um, Making sure that those things are taken out of the bed really sets up the expectation for the child to know that when they are in bed, that their job is to sleep, their job is not to play. And so that can be a little confusing for a child. If you're offering those objects at sleep time, then of course they're going to want to stay up and they're going to want to play and they're going to have that be a distraction. And so, really taking those barriers out of bed will help them know that the expectation is to sleep. Um, Also, predictable routines also establish order and trust. So it's super important that, regardless if it's dad or mom putting them to sleep, that it looks the same for either parent. Sometimes the, one parent might have a specific bedtime routine and maybe the other parent does something a little different. That is okay too. I also think that just having that be the same every time helps the child know and to adapt, like, okay, this happens when dad puts me to sleep, or this happens when grandma puts me to sleep. And so just making sure that you're consistently doing the same thing every time. um, this is super important and very true to what we do at school too. Rena and I do the exact same thing every time that we put the child down to sleep. We sit in the exact same spot. We do the exact same things. We sit next to the exact same children, or we might switch where we sit. But those things are the same every single day for a specific reason, and we do that so that the children know, okay, this is how Rena puts me to sleep, and this is how Haley puts me to sleep, and it looks exactly the same. When we say that we're helping them, all that we do is just basically put our hand on their back, just so that they know that we're here. We're also holding the space for them to know that this is nap time, and that we know that the expectation is for them to sleep. And so we're just there to hold the space, to trust, to know that the children can do that on their own. um, every day we talk about the expectation for nap, what nap looks like every day. And so we talk about, when it's nap time, we're not talking. When it's nap time, we're not playing. When it's nap time, it's your job to sleep. And that when nap starts, those expectations are set. And so every day we talk about these things so that the child knows, okay, when it's nap time, I'm not talking, I'm resting, and that it's not a time to play. And so naturally the child will start doing that on their own, which then helps have less tantrums because the prepared environment is set. Um, Also, sometimes it can be a little tricky if the child's maybe not sleeping at home. We do The expectation is that they do sleep at school, and so that's something that we set, and that is our goal of when a child is napping at school, that they will be sleeping during nap time. Um, See, also, adapt or observing the child, and adapting to whatever it is that you're seeing is super super important. So follow the child's cues. Are they rubbing their eyes? Is there a change in behavior? Maybe they are, like I said, falling asleep at the lunch table. Think about what it is that you are seeing, and really follow those cues of the child. That's super important because they're the ones that are telling you exactly what it is that they need. Um, Also think about, when nap does start for them. Does it start the same time every day? Does it start the same time also on the weekends? That's super important, to keep it really consistent so that the child knows, okay, at 12 o'clock, it's nap time. And their body's going to naturally start to adapt to that schedule. And they'll naturally start to get tired around those times too. um, their body will just start to sync to that schedule. If a child's having a bigger emotion, or maybe not, um, or just kind of more sensitive, or not falling asleep to nap time, maybe you miss that window of time when they were really tired. And so maybe they're now kind of fighting you on nap and not wanting to sleep. So think about that too, of maybe, were they tired 20 minutes earlier and we decided to do this activity, but now the child's having a tantrum, and, we missed that window and now they're awake. Think about that too. And then also modify the times of the when you put the child to sleep at night. That will really help to know, like, they didn't sleep during the day, okay, I'm going to put them to sleep sooner. um, Also, one other thing with the prepared environment, it's also really important to know, like, what exactly that looks like. So, are you closing the curtains? Are you closing the blinds? Do you have a sound machine? Do you have specific music that you play? Do you have a diffuser? Thinking about all of those things also really helps to set the expectation in a physical way too. And so that's super important. And we do the exact same things at school every single day for that reason, so that the children know, oh, you're closing the blinds. that means nap is starting. So that really just helps them be in more awareness of what's happening around them. So these are just kind of some general situations that I was thinking about that can happen around sleep or tantrums or just different kind of experiences that may come up. So what if your child only sleeps, only takes a nap at school and not at home? We're still going to offer a quiet place for them to sleep. I also highly suggest that you do the same at home. So even if they're not wanting to sleep or actually take a nap, that you're still offering them to help just kind of have a rest period. Back to the beginning where we were just talking about, um, like their memory and stored experiences and their creativity, all of those things also need to happen when they sleep. So we also need to provide them the opportunity to do that also while they're just resting peacefully too. Um, so having a place where they can rest, making sure it's the same every single day. um, you know Closing the blinds, closing the curtains, having white noise on, just kind of sets the expectation like it's still quiet time. And helping the child realize that if they are tired they will eventually sleep, but still providing them with that opportunity is super important. What does that environment look like at home? Are there toys in the bed? Take the toys out if so. Just thinking about back to that prepared environment so that the child's still having the opportunity to rest. If they sleep, that's great. If they're just resting, they're still able to just help those experiences, connect in their brain, and hopefully lessen the tantrums later. Um, maybe the child really just fights you on nap every day and really just doesn't want to sleep. Look at the sleep windows. Maybe they're really overstimulated. Maybe they just need a quiet place to sleep. So think about when you're putting them to sleep, or if you've maybe waited a little bit too long, just being really aware of what that looks like too. Maybe your child wakes up really cranky or tired, you know, kind of more irritable in the morning. Maybe they're throwing things or having a tantrum in the morning. Think about when you put them to bed. Look at how much sleep they got that day, and that night as well. Maybe they are sick, or maybe they aren't feeling that great, or maybe they just are kind of just working through this and you just need to give them time to experience this. And so think about those things too, also when you look at the wake windows and just the prepared environment too. Maybe change the time that they do go to sleep, and that will help with the time that they wake up too. Maybe they need to release more energy, and maybe you go for a really quick walk around the block, or play a really fast game of tag or something that's available, that you can offer, that might kind of help them kind of get out a little bit more energy right before then it's bedtime. um, uh, does your child want another parent to help put them to sleep? Maybe they're throwing a tantrum until the other parent comes to help. um, think about, are you allowing that second parent to come in and help you? Does that shift or change the energy, or does it kind of escalate it? Now does the child think that it's time to play instead of time to rest? Think about all those things. Obviously, if it's accessible to you and that other parent is there to help you, great. If it does kind of escalate things, or if the child is acting out, then maybe that wasn't a great situation to use in that moment. But think about those things, observe, and try it again, or try something different the next time. Maybe your child stalls or asks for a snack before bed, or maybe didn't eat as much before they go to bed. Think about those things. So is it okay to offer a snack if they're asking, if they're for more food, if they're hungry? Observe those situations and those behaviors before offering a snack, because then that might be a consistent thing that the child is asking for. Does your child maybe need to go to the bathroom or maybe has a BM before they go to sleep? Do they have the opportunity to do that before they sleep? Maybe that affects their behavior if they're just a little bit more irritable if they don't have that as an option. Think about all of those things too before putting your child to sleep. Um, it might really help if they have a bath every night. That might just kind of help set the expectation of like, okay, now it's bedtime. Kind of helping their body unwind a little bit. Um, does your child ask for something before they go to bed every night? Are they trying to get out of sleeping? Just be really aware of um, what's happening and observing and figuring out what the child is telling you. If you can offer a snack, great. Maybe the next day they might not ask for it, but if they do, maybe you do feed them a little bit earlier or maybe more food at dinner time or lunchtime to see if that might help kind of sustain them until they wake up the next time. Maybe your child is refusing to sleep, having sleep regression. Still provide a quiet rest period. So if a child is not sleeping anymore or isn't wanting to sleep anymore, just keep in mind and be aware of how old they are. It's should be something not coming from the child of like, I don't want to sleep anymore, which can happen. And so I think just being aware of that and thinking about that. And if you do say, okay, let's try not napping today, kind of seeing how they do. And maybe they do start to really have tantrums or really acting out later in the night, then that's a cue to you that they're not ready to transition out of sleep. If the child is not wanting to sleep, still offering that quiet rest period, still offering that opportunity for them to rest. They may fall asleep or they may not. Just still having that as an opportunity is great. Um, like I said, taking barriers away, so not having toys or anything that they can do instead, that the expectation is still that they're going to rest. And also, just still having it be the same, that if the child's not wanting to sleep, that you still set up the expectation that this is time to sleep, so that it looks the same, so that they know, okay, this is the expectation. um, I do know that it can be really helpful to have kind of more of like a physical clock or a timer that changes color. That might also really help if you are offering a child to sleep or to rest, having that be something that you can talk about of, when the light is red, you're staying in bed. And when the light turns green, you can get up. And so thinking about those things too, that maybe if they're still resting, they might be waiting for that to change color. They might be waiting for that cue of that music to turn off. And so thinking about that too, of maybe not offering all that information if it's not helping the child. Maybe you just, take those things away, or maybe you don't have it be available so that the child just knows this is the expectation and it's time to rest your body. It's still so important, like I was saying, that if your child isn't sleeping, that you still provide a rest period. That is still something that children, even at school, might not be sleeping that full time, but we're still providing them with the opportunity that they are resting, and that they eventually do fall asleep. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer for a child to naturally fall asleep. And so it's really great that they still have that opportunity to rest, to then fall asleep and to just really, help with that brain development and physical development and just overall development, which really helps them not have as many tantrums later or other ways to kind of be a little bit more sensitive, because they are provided with the opportunity to rest. One other thing before we get into key points is, when we think about sleep, and maybe it isn't always challenging for you, or maybe it isn't always challenging for the child. I do a lot of observation and a lot of reflection too. And I honestly have not always struggled with sleep at school. And there were a few times earlier this year where Rena and I were talking often about different challenges and things in the day, and we both said sleep. And it was just something that I was like, okay, we really need to figure out what exactly this looks like in the day. Let's talk about it. Let's think about what does our prepared environment look like? How are we helping certain children? What does that look like? Um, you know, what if we're not helping them? What does that look like? Where are we sitting? Maybe we've changed around some of the places where the children sleep. And so we really observed and we really figured out, okay, what is, back to the beginning, what is our end goal? We ideally want the child to sleep, right? And so that was really awesome when I brought this up to Stephanie. And she was like, she listened to everything that Rena and I were saying, and just basically said, what is your end goal? What ideally do you want them to do during nap? And I instantly was like, yes, I want them to sleep. Rena agreed also. And so we figured out ways and changed different things in the nap room to really have it be something that it was successful for the child as well as for us, the adult. And so, it may not always feel challenging, but maybe it doesn't feel right, or maybe doesn't feel as peaceful as you want it to be. And so we were helping a few children at that time. And Stephanie had a really great point of just like, well, if you're wanting the child to self soothe, you need to give them the opportunity to try on their own. And so we gave it 6 weeks. We really just kind of breathed through it. There were some challenging days where I was just like, we can do this, it's going to work, even when it felt really hard. And so, once we did read through that, you do see that the child can do it on their own, and they really can. And so that was really beautiful to know that, like, we are always adapting and we are always changing, and that did really also help just with their overall mood as well as ours. And so I wanted to share that situation with you so that you can see that it's not just the parent, it's also us too. Like, we're constantly adapting and constantly figuring out how can we better serve the child. And when I realized, like, sleep was one of the hardest times of the day when before it wasn't, and that's okay. I think just being aware of that really helps to know, how can you change this? What does your prepared environment look like? And so it worked out really beautifully, and nap is really great. So I'm happy to help talk you through some of those things too, if that would be helpful. But just wanted to share a little bit more about that situation with y'all so that you can see that even I struggle sometimes with sleep. Um, so one thing that I just wanted to remind you all about are certain things to just really keep in mind when we think about sleep and how it affects our behavior is really sticking to consistent sleep and wake times. Really just thinking about what does that look like um, during the week as well as the weekends. Are you still providing them with an opportunity to rest? Are you still providing them the same times to sleep and the same times to rest? Really just thinking about that consistently will really help. Really observe the child. Are they showing you cues that they're tired earlier? Maybe you change your schedule so that you provide nap time earlier. That's okay. Maybe they are tired later on at night. Okay, maybe you kind of change what that bedtime routine looks like to help adapt or help the child. So just really observe what your child is showing you. Um, Avoid overstimulation before bed. Really just have that be a really peaceful transition. Like I had said, maybe you do bath time, maybe you read 3 stories, maybe you're in bed quiet and you're preparing that environment, or maybe it's already set so the child's walking into a really nice, peaceful, quiet room with the windows closed and the blinds closed and the white noise on, and that really just sets the expectation of this is time to sleep. Allow for independence in those sleep routines. So, really having the child learn to self soothe, taking those barriers out. having that be a part of giving that the child the opportunity to sleep and be a part of that is really going to help lessen the tantrums too, lessen the behaviors of them also having this be a big part in their day, also knowing that they are controlling um, their sleep and being more independent. And just like I was saying earlier, just be really aware of the schedule and what that looks like. Maybe you offer nap a little bit sooner, or maybe you offer it a little bit later. Just keeping those times in mind so that what that looks like, so that the child has the best opportunity to sleep and you're setting them up for success. Awesome. So I will see if y'all have any questions. Let me see. Um, oh dear. There we go. Get back. Yeah. So if y'all, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have, or if maybe you have asked questions along the way, I'm happy to answer them now. Um, but yeah, I'm so grateful that you all could be here.
Haley, I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
Hi. Um, can you share your thoughts, if you have any, on how to prepare to make an intentional change with your sleep routine? So, for example, probably in the next like 2 months, we are going to be moving Cooper from his current room, which no judgment, but he's still happily sleeping in his crib and not in a toddler bed. But he's going to be moving into a shared room with his brother in like a regular bed. And so I've been toying with, like, is it better to do one big change and go from his crib in his room to his new big boy bed shared with his brother, versus smaller but like multiple changes, like to go from his crib to now it's like we do the conversion and he can have the freedom to be in and out of his crib in his room, and then we move. I don't know, like, what is the least disruptive, or like what will set him up for success the most.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I I like the opportunity of both. I think whatever you can start first and whatever you can um, have kind of be like a concrete expectation of, like, ideally you want him to be in the big bed. And so I think the sooner that you can start that, the better, so that he can practice being in a big bed, I think is going to be a big change already. Um,
Yeah.
he's going to have a lot more freedom within that too. And so I think giving him the opportunity to experience that first will really help, because then when you do move him in with his brother Cam, then he's probably going to be all excited, and then when there's all these changes he might just be like, I'm not sleeping, like this
Right.
exciting time. And so I see the benefit in also doing that at that time too, but you also aren't sure that, then the expectation is set that he's going to sleep. And so I think
Yeah.
and talk about it at a neutral time of, this is really exciting and you're going to be in a big bed, and in 5 more sleeps you're going to be in your big bed, and in 3 more sleep, and do a countdown that way. And then
Mm,
once you do the countdown, then it's like, okay, now we're in our big bed. And then you can do the same for then when he transitions into the room with Cam. And so I think,
yeah.
that will really help him know, like, okay, that's kind of just more of like a visual cue. And so that might really help. I think if you have the bed already, I think like having him be a part of setting that up and a part of that prepared environment of, like, okay, let's get the tools, and let's set it up and let's put it in your bed and let's pick out the sheets,
Mm,
exciting too. That might really help that transition to know that he was a part of it also.
yeah.
I think starting, and maybe if someone else might have a different perspective. I think starting the bed first will be really helpful, and then starting the transition to the room with brother, I think will help second. So then it's not all at one time, and you can still talk about it. Um,
Yeah.
I think definitely talking about it will really help. Um, and we can do the same at school when we know that he's going to transition into a big bed. And so
Okay. I
might
love that.
be the best option. If
Yeah.
anyone else has a different opinion, let me know.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I think
Excellent.
just like we prepare them at nap time. I think just still explaining the expectation to him, of like, this is sleep, and your job is to sleep, your job is to rest, your job is to stay in your bed. And so I think having the big bed will also might be helpful if you want to use more of those visual cues of having a light or a sound machine that changes color. I know that that has helped some families really give the visual cue of the child to the child of like, when it's red, you stay in bed. um,
Yeah.
and so you can kind of trial that for a little bit and see. And there might be a lot of excitement, and that's totally normal. And I think if he is tired, he will eventually go to sleep. And if not, he will definitely be sleeping at school. And so it's just like breathing through this, right? Like giving
Yeah.
them the opportunity to try, trusting and knowing that he can do it. Also having that trust and that feeling in yourself will really help too, to know that like, hey, these changes are happening. I'm going to breathe through it. Cooper can do it on his own. I have faith. He's strong. He's going to sleep. It's going to be a great night. And just setting that expectation already will really help him feel that, and to know that this is just what the expectation is. Sure, it might ebb and flow, and that's normal with any sort of change. I think consistently do the same every single day so that he just knows, okay, this is the expectation. And you never know. There might not be anything that happens, and he might just be like, "Oh, cool, I'm in a bed. I'm going to sleep." That could happen.
Yeah.
So you just got to still give them the opportunity to try, so that they can have that experience to then know, um, you know, what will happen. The
Thank
unknown.
you.
So
Love
hard.
that. Thank you.